Well, okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome. Today, we are having a conversation curative therapies from decision making to life after. This event is sponsored by SC Red, and I am your host, Dima Hendricks. Today, unfortunately, Tiana Wilford is not able to be our host today. So I'm filling in, and my, I have my co-host with me, Wunmi Bakare, who's my sickle sister and friend. Introduce yourself, Wumi.
Hi everyone, Wunmi here. Also, a cell and gene therapy recipient. I am 4 years post stem cell transplant. Happy to be co-hosting this with my sickle sister Dima Hendricks. We have a new podcast coming out soon through the genes that talks about the nuances of cell and gene-based therapies and the risks, benefits, and limitations. So we hope to give you a little bit of tease of our chemistry, but also more to highlight these incredible patients who have embarked on these journeys and kind of set a path for others to follow.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Wumi, for introducing yourself. And I hope you guys are looking forward to tuning into Through the Genes that's coming your way June 19th, World Sickle Cell Day. So I want to start off by introducing our esteemed panelists. These are some rock stars that have been through the curative therapy process, have made the decision to go all the way, and now we're here to talk about life after. So first, I would like to introduce Victoria Gray. Victoria, could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Victoria Gray. I'm now 38-year-old warrior and mother of 4, and I was the first person to undergo CRISPR gene therapy in 2019. So my hope is for other patients to receive these different therapies and have the benefits that I have now.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us, Victoria. Next, we also have a male represented today. I want to introduce Jimi Olaghere. Could you please introduce yourself?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I had the good fortune of reading the fearless Victoria Gray story about probably 4 years ago, and probably that led to me being sitting here with you right now. So just really gracious and grateful, I should say. I participated in Casgevy as well after seeing the success that it had with Victoria. Now I'm a father of 3 and doing good.
Thank you, Jimi. Kenda Cole, could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Kenda Cole. So I am a caregiver. My first daughter, Callie, received a bone marrow transplant in April of 2021, just before her 4th birthday. And her sibling matched donor was my daughter, Rain, here, who at the time was 17 months old. And so now we're 3 years post-transplant, and both Callie's doing well and thriving, and Rain's growing and thriving too.
Awesome. Tesha Samuels, could you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Yes, and thank you for having me. I am Tesha Samuels. I am a 42-year-old warrior. I underwent gene therapy at NIH for the Bluebird bio trial, which is now Lyfgenia. And I am now 6 years beyond transplant. I am excited to be here. I also am the co-founder of Journey to Excellence, which is a nonprofit organization supporting adult sickle cell warriors. So I'm pleased to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Last but not least, Ashley Durden. Could you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Hi, yes. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having us. I'm Ashley Durden. I am the caregiver of a 9-year-old sickle cell warrior who underwent gene therapy, the CRISPR Vertex trial. She had her transplant October 16th, 2023. And it was because of the adults that paved the way for us for VEA to be the second youngest pediatric child to enter her trial to help lower the age range so other young sickle cell warriors will be able to receive this therapy.
Well, thank you so much for everyone that's on this panel. I'm excited to have this conversation with you because I selfishly want to learn what led you guys to go through this process. So, Victoria, I want to start with you because you were the first person to go through this gene therapy, and you actually inspired Jimi. So I just want to know, like, can you describe your decision-making process before the gene therapy, and what was it like for you? What was it like growing up with sickle cell disease?
Growing up with sickle cell disease, for me, I had so many challenges. I had my first crisis at 3 months, and that was just the start of what my life would look like. So from the age of 3 months until the age of 34, I had continuous crisis. I can't count the number of blood transfusions I had to have. And my life was just full of limitations. And throughout the years, my crisis worsened. As a kid, I remember being in the hospital for a week, and I could go 3 to 6 months without another crisis. But as I transitioned to teenager, that 1 week went to sometimes 2 weeks with stronger doses of pain medicines, more blood transfusion. And then when I reached the age 21, my crisis jumped to I could be in the hospital for a month. My longest stay in a crisis was 3 months. And during that crisis, I couldn't use my arms. I couldn't use my legs. I was bedbound. And I went from regular blood transfusions to apheresis process where I was getting my blood removed and getting 6 to 7 units of donor blood. It was dropping my blood pressure. It was just misery. I gave up dream after dream, from wanting to be a cheerleader, couldn't do, wanted to be a basketball player, couldn't do, wanted to run track, to my college years of wanting to be a cardiologist. And the stress was too much, too many classes. So my doctor said, hey, it's just going to be too much for you. Then wanted to be a nurse. And then my health just kept declining. So I did become a mother. I got married. And once I saw that my disease and my hospital stays were affecting my children mentally, because I got a call from my son's teacher saying that he was getting in trouble so much because he was afraid I was going to die. So he was trying to get suspended so he could be home to monitor me for when it happened. So I knew I couldn't take my kids through that type of trauma. So that's when I looked and tried to research different things. But gene therapy happened to come about when I was preparing for a bone marrow transplant.
Okay.
And so I weighed my chances because I was afraid of graft versus host disease with bone marrow transplant because my brother was only a half match. And when I knew that there wasn't a possibility with gene therapy, even though I knew I would be the first, being a woman of faith helped me navigate that space when God gave me peace. And I felt that this was my gateway to my miracle. And it worked out in my favor.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. I want to kind of go off to Kendra a little bit here because Kendra, you made the decision for your 3-year-old to go through the process. What made you want your young child to go through the process?
Yeah, for sure. So my first daughter, Callie, we got pregnant with her the traditional way. With my husband and I were, married for a few years and wanted to start our family. And so we found out about her sickle cell diagnosis 10 days into her being born through newborn screening process. And as any parent knows, when they get that diagnosis, it's devastating. You don't know. Callie was the first person in our family to have sickle cell disease. So there was just so much unknown. We had no idea how this was going to impact her life. She had her first pain crises at 4.5 months. And from there, she was pretty much in and out of the hospital every 2 to 3 weeks up until about age 15 months or so. So, us being first-time parents, just dealing with the normal, learning curve of having a new baby, but then on top of it, the pain crises after pain crises, after, infections and just the long hospital stays. It was just really, it just really was difficult to deal with. And so my husband and I, we knew we wanted to expand our family. And so we actually decided to do in vitro fertilization for a few reasons. So first, so that our additional children wouldn't be born with the disease, because they can do genetic testing of the embryos. And then the second reason is that we wanted Callie to have a sibling match donor. So we first went through Be the Match and tried to find her a donor that was already here, but she had no match in the registry. So the only way that she would be able to, have bone marrow transplant be an option for her was the full sibling matched donor. And so that's the route we went. So we went through a year of IVF. We ended up having 5 healthy embryos, 2 matched for Callie. Our first transfer failed and our second transfer stuck. And that's how we got our daughter Rain, who was born in 2019. And then in early 2021, during a routine TCD scan for Callie, we learned that she had a high susceptibility rate to stroke. And so her doctors, her hematology team basically said, well, we're just going to put her on a blood transfusion program moving forward. And at this time, Callie was 3. So her birthday's in April, and we were doing this in February of 2021. And we knew that doing the bone marrow transplant process, she'd have to get a blood transfusion anyways. And my mother-in-law, actually, she, constantly prayed for us. And she had always told us, like, I know that God has spoken to me, and Callie is going to be cured before she's school age. Before she gets into school, she's going to be cured of sickle cell disease. And so given this results from TCD, we decided to quickly move forward with bone marrow transplant. My daughter, Rain, who was the sibling match donor, Rain was 17 months. And she came in like a champ and sat for 6 hours and gave her donation. And on April 1st of 2021, Callie received her bone marrow transplant. She was at Lurie Children's Hospital in Chicago. She was inpatient for about 4 weeks. And since then, she hasn't had any complications, no graft versus host. And she's now 7 years old. She's thriving. She's healthy. And her donor, Rain, my other daughter, Rain, she's now 4. And they're both in school, and they're both doing so well.
It's so amazing to hear success stories like that. Thank you for sharing. So Tesha, tell me a little bit about your journey. What made you decide to go through the process?
In complete transparency, I was desperate by the time I made that decision to go through gene therapy. There weren't any platforms like this where we can come and learn and hear from other patients. It was a very new thing. And so just a little bit about my journey. So I was not diagnosed until I was at the age of 2. So I'm not even sure if they were crises, but my mom has definitely reflected that she could tell that I was in pain even at a young age, trying to pick me up, try to coddle me. I had several life-changing, life-altering not transfusions, but just my stages in my development. I would fall easily at the age of 7. I had my first major crisis at the age of 7, which was an aplastic anemia crisis. At the age of 13, I suffered a TIA, which actually triggered that transfusion therapy for me. And so by the time I got to 35, when I decided to really look and research, I really, to be honest, was not even sure that there was anything out there. Everything had been about a half match or a full bone marrow transplant. And that for me was not an option. And so I reached out to NIH and said, hey, what do you have? Is there anything? And so to my surprise, I got an email back with 3 options. And when I read that, my faith said, this is it. Like, this is what you've been waiting for. the harder part was getting my family members and my community on board with that, aligning them with the faith that I had in science and having them meet at that crossroads. But just throughout childhood, through my youth and development, I mean, I was in the hospital, like Victoria said, you would go in initially for maybe a week, and then it prolonged to a month. The entire fall season, you can count on Tesha being in the hospital. And so by the time I was a married woman, I wanted children. I had 2 ectopic pregnancies.
Wow.
Really, you know, at that time, I was desperate. And so I just went on faith. I sat down with the physicians and the team at NIH. I said, okay, I need my family to be on board. I need them to be involved. And so we had a huge meeting and just allowed them to hear it from a perspective that I couldn't hear it from, because again, from a place of desperation, you just like, whatever you think will work, sign me up. And so as I reflect back on it, I'm so grateful for the faith that fueled me, because, you know, had I had some of the information or maybe had resources like this, maybe the outcome might have been different. I may have went a different direction, but I'm so glad that I did make this decision. And I'm happy that I'm helping others to find their path to a better life.
One thing I do notice, thank you for sharing your story. One thing I do notice is one theme that reigns true for a lot of warriors, that word desperation. A lot of people that I've come in contact with were desperate, needed something to relieve their pain. And so that's something that is just a constant recurring theme. And I'm sure that's a theme. I don't know if that's a theme that ran with you, Jimi. Can you share a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. Just like everyone else, my driving force was actually desperation as well. But before the desperation, there was despair. And there was, for a long period of time, I was just floating through life, hoping to end at one point. And I think my family could really sense that. And they had really encouraged me to try to figure out a way to improve my quality of life. And I started doing some research, and I had come across a story about a doctor in the Far East that had used genetic therapy for something else. And I just wondered, you know, is there a way that you can use this technology to cure genetic diseases? And I remember just putting a Google alert on with genetic therapy, gene editing, and sickle cell disease. And I think about 2 years after that research, I had done that research, I got an article in my inbox about Vicky Gray here sitting with us, that the first person to have her sickle cell alleviated through gene editing. And I was in shock that, well, unbeknownst to me, I thought gene therapy was something far in the future, you know. Unbeknownst to me, it's already been working in the underground. Someone has already gone through the trial and is experiencing positive effects from it. As soon as I read that article, I reached out to the team that had done Vicky's transplant, and they reached back out as quickly as possible. It was actually quite surprising how fast they got back to us, my wife and I, and you know, we started the process to get qualified. But I was extremely desperate. My wife was 8 months pregnant at the time, and like pretty much everyone on the panel here, sickle cell had really won every battle in my life. Education, I remember having to withdraw every semester. I could never finish a semester. Thankfully, I had that ability to withdraw. I wasted so much of my parents' money trying to finish college, my career as well. Many times I tried to, you know, steer it in the way that I wanted to do it to go, and sickle cell just said, nope, this is what we're doing. Get used to it. And just the health complications that just came at me constantly. It was a barrage of one complication after the other, you know, cardiac arrest, pulmonary embolism, gallbladder had to be removed, avascular necrosis. And at one point in my life, I was just bedridden, you know, stuck on the bed from sun up to sundown. And it was just really, really dark. And when I read that Victoria's story and the fact that I was about to be a father, I knew sickle cell was going to win that battle as well. My wife and I had actually struggled for several years, 7 years to be exact, to become parents. Sickle cell also responsible for that, because I had gone through several rounds of hydroxyurea, which, to be quite honest, it didn't slow down my crises at all. But unfortunately, I had the side effect of where it made it difficult for me to become a father. And we had gone through a few rounds of IVF that weren't successful, and this one stuck. And just in my desperation to, one, not pass that burden of caregiving to my children, because I had seen how difficult it was with my parents and my wife and even my friends. I was like, there's no way I'm passing this off to my kids. And I don't know how. I mean, it's definitely a miracle. My mom's a woman of faith, and her prayers came true at the end of the day, that I would be healed of this disease. And everything just worked out perfect before my son was 1 year old. He went through the clinical trial with us. He was literally on the bed with me throughout the whole thing for the better part of a year. And just really reading Vicky's story. And I think that what really caught me about Vicky's story was the fact that she was able to be the mother she had always imagined herself to be. And that was it for me. I'm like, oh, I'm doing this. I don't care anything. I didn't care about the side effects. They actually had to force me to read what could potentially go wrong if you go through a therapy like this, because it's no small feat. It's quite new. It had never been tested. There was, I think at the time, only 3 people that had gone through the trial. So there was very minimal data out there, but none of that worried me at all.
Thank you for sharing. So Ashley, I do want to get to you because you have your beautiful 9-year-old Vea. I want to know what made you decide for your child to go through this curative therapy at such a young age.
Just like so many others have spoken about the desperation and the fear and the ugliness of sickle cell disease and how it affects your life in every way, from mentally, physically, spiritually, losing relationships, friendships, the isolation that comes with this disease. So like Kendra, I discovered that there was a possibility that Vea would have sickle cell disease when I was about 5 months pregnant. I knew I had a family history of sickle cell trait that ran in the family, but my parents wasn't quite sure what children carried trait. So I later decided to get tested just so I would know my status. However, her father's side of the family they didn't know that they had a history of sickle cell trait. So I just told him to get tested so we could put it on our medical records, and his results came back that he was also a trait carrier. And I kind of say then, I think God started to prepare me of what was to come on our journey. I started to see a lot of information about sickle cell disease, advertisements, saw it on a bus billboard. And I was like, whoa, that's quite strange. Like, it's so in my face. So when Vea was born, we discovered during her 2-week newborn screening that she did have sickle cell. And our life kind of just took a toll upside down from there. She also started having her first complications around 3 months. We were in and out of the hospital. And it was kind of eye-opening because although the doctors tried their best to prepare us, they didn't quite tell us what the sickle cell journey would look like. So I remember her first fever. They told us, like, just bring her into the hospital. I was thinking we were just going to get some Tylenol. They were going to observe her and then we were going to go home. And then the nurse rode in a cart with a whole bunch of tubes and IVs, and I almost hit the floor. And that was kind of the start of our journey. Just watching her go through so much at such a young age, being stuck 10 to 11 times, having IVs where they couldn't access a vein, so they had to put it in her scalp. It was very traumatic. Just a lot of complications, from fevers to pain crisis to acute chest, a lot of stomach issues, gallstones, constipation. It also started to affect her her self-esteem, because a lot of her classmates would wonder, like, Val, why are you always so sick? Why are you always in the hospital? Why are your eyes yellow? So we would have to do a lot of self-esteem building and encouraging her that, that she's beautiful. And then even she started to hate, like, why do I have to have sickle cell disease? But in 2020, I want to say our lives really turned upside down when she contracted COVID, and she had a lot of complications from that. Shortly after she healed from COVID, she also went in for a pain crisis that later turned into acute chest, and her left lung collapsed. And that was one of the scariest moments as a mom, from going to talking to Vea, her being able to communicate with me till the sensors going off, the nurses and the medical team running in because her oxygen saturation numbers had plummeted, until them moving us to the ICU because she was the sickest child on the unit. And it was then that I knew that I wanted off of this sickle cell journey. So we decided to contact her medical team to get a referral to talk to the transplant team. We were actually on our way to do a bone marrow transplant. We had discovered that she had several 8 out of 10 matches, and we were at the point of getting ready to contact some of her matches to see if they would be willing to donate their bone marrow. And one day at work, I received an article about a young man that had been cured by gene therapy. Later discovered that article was about Jimi. So I just want to say thank you so much, Jimi, because without that article, our lives could have been different. I was always hesitant about doing the bone marrow transplant because I was so fearful of the graft versus host disease. I had met some warriors that had a transplant that failed, and they had complications with graft versus host. And so I always questioned or feared that. So by that article, I decided to just contact the hospital that he was treated at. And they gave me information about the trial. They let me know that there was a pediatric trial coming in the spring. They took down our information, and we later discovered that Vea did qualify. So we went through the protocols, the procedures to make sure that she was healthy enough to go through transplant. And she had her transplant October 16th, and it's been just a life-changing experience. And I finally feel like I can breathe. For 9 years, I felt like I was always holding my breath because you just never know when the unexpected sea of sickle cell disease will hit you. 1 minute she's doing fine, the next minute we're in the ICU, and I'm questioning if my baby will come home or if she's going to make it out and we're going to be able to spend more time together. So I just knew I had to do something because I started to kind of question what her quality of life would look. And I wanted her to be able to enjoy life without the constant battling of sickle cell disease.
Wow. Thank you for sharing.
I love that in this community, we're all uniquely different. Hearing each and every story that's shared today, you guys showcase the gamut of the patient experience, from two parents who really critically were looking at their young children and fearful for the life that they would live with this debilitating blood disease, to 3 adults who were navigating life and trying to figure out, well, I want to be here. I want to improve my quality of life. But I think in conversations around cell and gene therapies, there is one primary thing, which is the impact on patients and families when it comes to support. This is a life-changing treatment. And so for each and every one of us, it wasn't a knee-jerk decision. There was a lot of thought. There was a lot of considerations, pros and cons, conversations with family members. I'm going to start with Victoria again. Can you share with us what type of support did you have from healthcare and community when you were embarking on your gene therapy journey?
Well, my only support from healthcare was the team at Sarah Cannon and TriStar Centennial. They were very encouraging because they're out of state. So I did travel from Mississippi to Tennessee to do gene therapy. And my experience with that team had been better than my adult years here in Mississippi with the healthcare teams here when I was going to the emergency room. So that was refreshing. But community support, I must be honest, I limited who I told that I was going to do gene therapy. Most people, they knew I was going to do bone marrow transplant, so they was okay with that because that had been around. So it was no worries or concern there. It was just like, okay, Vicky's going to have bone marrow transplant, and kind of same as it been throughout my sickle cell journey with my crisis. Everybody just say, oh, Vic's going to have a transplant and going about their business. So when gene therapy came about, I made the decision only to tell my children, my husband, and my mom, dad, sister, brothers, and only my closest friends. Not even everyone in my friend group knew what I was doing, because I didn't want to be discouraged. It wasn't a time where I needed people to doubt. I needed a strong circle. But even with that, my mom, she wasn't sold on gene therapy. My brother, one of my brothers, my youngest brother, he cried. So it was a time though where I just had to go on what I wanted this time, and my covenant with God, because it was something that I had talked to God about. And so I knew some things, which was this, I was gonna have to go through alone. And it was a faith walk, and it was hard to try to get people to set aside 3 months of their time to go out of state with me. My husband, he was trying to work to keep things going here at home. And most of my family was just unsure. So the time got divided. My daddy made the final decision to go with me the first 30 days. And then my mother-in-law for 2 weeks. And then my husband, he was there for the last 3 weeks. My stay was much shorter than what we planned for. And being a mom, I also had to make arrangements for my children to go live with my mom while I was going to be away. But one thing that surprised me when I talked to my children about gene therapy, and that mama wanted to be better, they were one of my biggest support systems. They like, Mom, we want you to do this. They didn't doubt, not once. They shed tears when it was time for me to go, because they just wasn't used to me being that far away from them. But it was something they wanted, because they was tired of me being sick. And it was something I pretty much traveled along with me and my God throughout the journey. Not a whole lot of community support, but I made it through.
Thank you for sharing that, because this is such an intimate decision-making process. And I think as patients, you almost have to have tunnel vision for you to overcome the challenges that you are about to face. So keeping it close to the chest makes sense. Tisha, what about you? What was your experience like? What kind of support did you have from healthcare providers and community?
So from the healthcare community, when I made that decision to move forward with gene therapy, that care was transitioned from my hematologist that I was seeing. The good thing about that particular, that this trial was at NIH and I was residing in Maryland. Therefore, the commute wasn't so bad for myself and for family members. But the conversation happened with my local healthcare provider, as well as the team at NIH. Dr. Shea was very supportive in that he was willing to speak to family member, community member, caregivers, whoever would be in my circle. He was very willing and open to do that. So he had constant communication with my hematologist. But beyond the iron chelation medication, which I was doing on a monthly basis, which I did at my local healthcare center, everything else from pain management, acute and otherwise, as well as any blood testing, things of that nature, was done there at the NIH center. That team there knew that I was a woman of faith. I love that they aligned me with people that were like-minded, that had the faith that I had, that though this was going to be a challenge for myself and my family and my community, that they were to support me spiritually, physically, mentally. And so was able to get the mental health support while I was going through. I was able to get all of my needs met as far as sickle cell was concerned until we went through the actual therapy. So that continued. The support from family members, like I said, very similar to Jimi as well as for Victoria. My family were like, sickle cell is the disease that we know. Like, that is the beast that we know. We know how to support you when you're going through at that time. But this gene therapy, which had very few patients at the time that we could look at, to highlight, to call, to see how they are doing, how it went, was very scary. And so even though they were there to acknowledge what I was experiencing, I felt like I had to be a support system for them as well, to say, hey, by faith, I have this. By faith, God has me. And so I know that you all will be okay. And to be honest, I really felt like if I did not make it through this particular journey, that this was going to help others. And so by talking to the other panelists here and seeing their beautiful children, to know that we have paved a way so that younger sickle cell patients and warriors can get through this even sooner, and they don't have to wait till they're 36 years old like I was, is a true blessing and testament to how far we've come. So I'm just honored that the healthcare team was able to assist me through that transition, and that we're finally getting to a place where sickle cell warriors feel heard, feel seen, and they're getting support and care that they need.
I love that in Black and Brown communities, faith is such a foundation for each and every one of us. I think everyone here has touched on it in one way or another, because I think God is at the center of everything that we do. And so it's really exciting. It's just a true testimony of like courage, resilience, and like a mental tenacity to be able to overcome what we have. Kendra and Ashley, I'm going to move to both of you, because you both offer kind of the caregiver perspective in making a decision for your young children. So can you talk to us about, healthcare provider and community? What type of support did you have? Because for both of you, being that you were new parents with a child, Kendra, you mentioned in your family there wasn't anyone that actually had sickle cell disease. So this must have been, again, kind of a rude awakening, for lack of a better term. So can you kind of talk us through the kind of support that you had? Kendra, I'll start off with you, and then we'll move to Ashley.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, so we found out about Callie's diagnosis through newborn screening, and she was 10 days old. And I remember just getting that call and just running to my bedroom and just breaking down and crying. And I just thought, I said, how could I have done this? How did I not know my trait status? How could I have brought a child into the world like this? And I pretty much stayed in bed that whole day. And the next day I woke up and I said, okay, this is our life. We got to learn all we can about this. And how do we cure this? And so, my daughter's pediatrician at the time, they said, typically we don't recommend, we don't refer you out to a hematologist until age 6 months. We pushed that up and got Callie in at 2 months when she was 8 weeks old. And we went into that first meeting with the hematology team, and we were very clear that this was not something she was going to live with forever, and that we would have a cure. So we needed to have them refer us to any medical professional that we could. I took calls with Washington St. Louis. I took calls with Children's Hospital LA. I took calls with the Children's Hospital in DC. I pretty much just became obsessed with everything sickle cell disease and everything with bone marrow transplant. And her hematology team as well, when we went in 10 toes down and we were like, this is our path, so you can either get with it or not. Her hematology team referred us to the stem cell transplant team within her same hospital here in Chicago. And so we actually met with them when in January of 2018. So even before Callie was 1 year old. So we actually met with them periodically, I would say every 2 to 3 times a year, just to learn what their progress was, to learn, to keep in contact with them. I think that having that support system and starting those conversations early and often really helped both solidify me and my husband Lord's decision in taking this path, but also allowing that care team to get to know us as parents, get to know my child, and watch them grow. And then also, I think what's also really interesting and key is that as a caregiver, my OB actually was so supportive of us in terms of deciding to do IVF for our subsequent children. When it came down to storing the cord blood when I was pregnant with my second child, we met multiple times with my care team. They made sure that I was in therapy. They had multiple talks with us when I was even in the delivery room. And we also know about Black maternal mortality rates with that, right? And just any sort of, complications just with that, just being Black woman pregnant in the delivery room. And we had one nurse that was specifically designated with the collection of the cord blood. She did nothing else but set that case up, that package up, and collect it, and she was responsible for that. So I think that we have just been so fortunate to have a care team on multiple dimensions that has been supportive of us. Our family in particular, I think both my husband and I are certainly headstrong people in our family, and we kind of just said, look, like, y'all got to get with this. Like, this is what it is. This is Callie's disease. And, we need your support. Our whole entire family went out and registered with Be the Match. They all learned their trait status as well. They all now donate blood and donate bone marrow as well. And I think specifically, and during that, our transplant process as well, my mom actually moved to Chicago from Seattle to help us, to support us through that process. And my mother-in-law came as well to help us because we had my 17-month-old who was home at the time. And at the time, I was actually also pregnant with my third child in the middle of transplant process. So we just kind of like threw it all in at the same time, which is like kind of wild to think about. But yeah, it was a wild time, but I think having that support is so important.
When they say mothers are the epitome of strength, wow. Ashley, what was your journey like?
So my journey, I found that our healthcare team was very cooperative. They did a great job working together. We also did our transplant out of state in Nashville. We're from Atlanta. So they did a lot of the local labs, the transfusions. We were able to do that at home. And really, they did a great job communicating with each other to make sure that anything that we could do at home, they allowed us to do that. So we wouldn't have to travel as much to and from Tennessee. My family support, when I read this article, I decided to have a family meeting to inform them about the article, shed some information. We met with the medical team just to let them know, like, hey, this is something that I'm strongly considering for Vea. I also met with Vea because it was also important to get her buy-in because she was going to have to undergo this process. And I wanted to talk to her about what she could expect and if it was something that she would be willing to do. And I would let her know that I was standing behind her 100%. With our family, we did have some hesitation. I think it just comes natural being of African-American descent and some of the things that have been done to us throughout history when it comes to research. So we had to do a lot of talking and working with the medical team to kind of inform some of the family members to get them on board, to let them know that times have changed. It's a lot of things put in place to protect the participants that are going through clinical trials. And anything was to come up that we would have to be informed and we would have to consent to it. So once that took place and we got more family buy-in, we proceeded with doing the gene therapy. I discovered throughout the process that I had a plan put in place, like I'm going to get short-term disability and that's going to help me financially, or I might get long-term disability. And what I discovered was that none of those would be an option because they only benefit the person. So if I was going through gene therapy or if I had cancer and needed time away from work, it would cover me, but it did not cover time away from being a caregiver. So I found a lot of red tape that I had to navigate and kind of plan for, to see if this was something financially that we could even afford to do. But I think I was just so desperate to give Bea a better life that I was willing to sell my home, move back in with my mom, because we were going to get it done by any means necessary. But it was great that the sponsor took care of reimbursements on the back end. So that definitely helped out a lot. Also, some of my school colleagues, they did a GoFundMe. And so they helped to raise money. And I just thought that that was really such a blessing, because it covered, some of the food costs and from being in the hospital for 3 months without pay. It just took away some of that burden and some of the stressors, like being able to pay. But I did have to do a lot of saving ahead of time to kind of prepare for what's ahead, to make sure that my bills were going to get taken care of while I was financially away from work and undergoing this process. And that was could be definitely a big stressor, to make sure that we had a home to come back to. So that definitely helped out a lot with us navigating the process.
Dima, I'll let you take the next question because of time. I see we're like 45 minutes in, and so maybe we can just kind of move to the next set of questions.
Oh, we're right on top of that. So we just talked about caregivers. We talked about support. But there's a lack of support too that we not have yet to discuss yet. And so I want to know from each and every one of you, what improvements or advancements did you want to see within not only in the field of gene therapy and bone marrow transplants, but what other support did you want it to have, or what did you want to see during this time? Let me start with Victoria.
Well, for me, what I would like to see different, because here in Mississippi at the hematology clinic that I went to and still have to go to, I don't see any information that benefit patients with sickle cell disease. There isn't any flyers, even though I'm the first person from Mississippi to undergo Casgevy. That's not published here. So I didn't even know that there were options, even when it came down to bone marrow transplant, which has been around for many years. There wasn't even any information available there, here in Mississippi, about bone marrow transplant. And when I talked to one of my doctors about it, they told me that it was something that I shouldn't even consider unless I was on my deathbed. But I felt like living with sickle cell disease, I was on my deathbed every day, because it was only a matter of seconds that kept me from heart attack, stroke, crisis. Anything could happen at any moment. It's so unpredictable. So I would just like to see more information about resources for gene therapy, bone marrow transplant, new medications that here to treat sickle cell disease, because I didn't even know about any other medication besides hydroxyurea, which wasn't working for me. So I didn't have many options. So I would like to see that change. I didn't have any information about sickle cell foundations, any support groups. And I think I heard Ashley say her daughter was the only person in her family that had sickle cell disease. That was my case also. I only had one distant cousin that I met one time, and she was so much older than me. So I had no one around me growing up that had sickle cell disease. It made me feel like an outcast. So I would like to see more support groups and really collaborations from the sickle cell disease groups that's out here now. Because doing my research again, even after gene therapy, I see that there's many sickle cell organizations. But what about combined efforts? And this is just my transparent opinion. I see what other groups are doing. Why isn't this being done in the sickle cell community? I feel we can accomplish more as one voice. and bring about more change. So I just wanted to have more access to sickle cell foundations, more information in the clinics that we have to go to when we go get treated, and better etiquette from the doctors, bedside manners, and ERs, because those were my worst experiences.
Wow.
Just equally as bad as the disease itself. So there's a lot that Victoria would like to see change. A lot.
Wow. Now, Ashley, as a caregiver, you mentioned having to save up money just to make sure your bills were paid. Could you now? We shouldn't even be going through that if we're going to be trying to go through a cure, trying to save your child's life. And we see that with Ronald McDonald House, there's all these other charities that make sure that a parent doesn't have to go through that. What are some other areas of things that you want to see as a caregiver in this space?
I definitely want to see more policies being changed, workplace policies. Of course, yeah, I understand covering yourself, but also for a lot of women in the workforce, we are mothers. We do need to think about, okay, can we get something that also covers being a caregiver or a loved one or a dependent? You should be able to use your sick leave or your personal time, or just more protection when it comes to that. More education, more information, more grants. Vail also did fertility preservation, and I had to ask the sponsor, would they be willing to pay for her to undergo that procedure, because she hasn't gone through puberty. She doesn't have any eggs to take out. We have to think farther ahead. And I tried to get into a study at our home site, but that wasn't an option because they would have to amend the protocol to allow only one child to be entered. I think it only covered like if she had undergone a bone marrow transplant. So that's something that we also need to make sure that no matter what age range, if you're going through gene therapy, we also need to think about farther along if they also want to become a parent, that we shouldn't even have to ask the sponsor. It automatically should be offered. But like just more protection, more funding, even on to the policy side of extend like the Medicaid and not being able to qualify for a lot of different things. Although Vea had a illness that qualified her medically, because I am considered like lower or middle class, we weren't able to get any financial support on that end. So you find yourself alone trying to figure out how can you maintain your livelihood and also save your child. And that shouldn't even be your thought of concern. It should just be being able to focus on your child and having things or support foundations or grants come into place to kind of cover that gap in between while you go through this process. And even on down to the education and the school system side, we found out that they didn't even have things put into place for scenarios like this. And they couldn't accommodate us. So just more collaboration on the medical, the education, the funding, coming together to help parents during such a difficult, life-altering time.
So moving forward, I wanna for moving for time. We talked about the hopefulness that the curative therapy has to offer. We also talked a little bit about the community engagement, support, and the lack thereof. I want to get into a little bit of the risks. What were the risks that were presented to you? And pretty much, was there any fear going into this process because of those risks? I want to start with Jimi this time.
Risk-wise, there were a few things that were definitely presented. I think one of the most important one was off-target editing, which is when they accidentally edit a gene that they didn't mean to, due to CRISPR, at least the one I underwent at the time. It's very precise, but there's a chance they could unfortunately target something else. And then there was also obviously, of course, the potential to get leukemia or other blood cancers in the future. So they have a 15-year follow-up study to make sure any of that, to track that, to see if any of that happens. They have data on that. But for me, that didn't really bother me at all. I thought my quality of life was pretty poor anyway, that this was just the best option, regardless of whatever risks that may potentially happen or whatever side effects that I could potentially get from going through a trial like this. At the time when I was comparing apples to apples, I'm like, life sucks right now. And this is an option right now that could potentially make my life a lot better. And it seemed riskier for me not to take the opportunity to, even if it was for a few short years, improve my life.
Dima, you're on mute.
Sorry, I want to hear from a parent. So Kendra, you had a baby pretty much going into this process. How did you feel about going into the risks of curative therapy?
Yeah, so I think, again, for us, I think we were really gung-ho about her getting this transplant at some point in time, ideally earlier in life. And for us, a lot of the reason that we preferred for her to actually do this before she was school-aged was because just from joining other sickle cell communities and hearing from adults living with this disease, because it's such a it takes so much of a toll on your body, not even just like when you're sick, but just having the sickle cells in your body, that there's just so many side effects from the disease as a whole, that in our minds, we were thinking it would likely be better for us to do this sooner. So Callie would have less lifelong side effects from the disease. Specifically with bone marrow transplant in particular, there's obviously the biggest risk was the graft versus host disease, and her body, basically not taking on our other daughter Rain's donation. That said, we were actually very fortunate enough to have Callie's transplant be off study. So usually there is a set of people who are going into the bone marrow transplant process, and they all have the same protocol because they're trying to just improve it every time. Because Callie had a full sibling matched donor, and we were doing the transplant at a time that it was kind of off the wave of the larger group. They actually created her protocol specifically for Rain. And they used a lower dose of chemo for Callie. And so they were really trying to be very cognizant of how does chemotherapy impact her from a fertility perspective, because she was only 3 years old. So we have no idea whether or not what happened to her at 3 is going to impact her when she is a teenager, when she goes into adolescence, when she decides to have children. And I think that was like a really big risk for us as well. But I think given our approach in that I did IVF, I think me as a parent, I'm more equipped to talk to Callie about that. And we talk about it with the kids now that, there are some parents who have babies in the typical traditional way. And then there's other parents who have, babies through IVF, like we got Rain and like we got their brother. There's other parents who do adoption, right? So there's a lot of different options that are out there that we talk about with our kids now. But I think the big risk was the graft versus host disease. And I think one thing that was risky that was not presented to us in a way that was risky was actually getting the port surgery. It's relatively routine, I think, from the medical provider's perspective, but as a parent, it's like a major surgery. You're going in, she basically gets a central line. And I've been in contact with multiple families after our process that their children actually died as a result of the port therapy from complications leading right immediately after the port therapy or surgery. And that was not presented to us. That was like kind of like such a side note, something that you never even thought that the doctors didn't even give a second thought to. And even Callie, when she got her port in, she actually ended up having a fever 48 hours later. And so we actually had to go back into the hospital, get a whole dose of antibiotics to make sure that there was no infection in the port. And so I think that was a risk that we did not know that was presented to us, but it can be very scary. And there are other families who don't even get to the transplant process because of this one surgery and not understanding the complications that could potentially come from that.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. So we are at an hour, but before we go, I want each of you to briefly describe what it's like now post-curative therapy. Okay. I'm going to start with you, Victoria. What is it like now?
Life's completely different. I have more energy. I hadn't been in anyone's ER my life where I was getting apheresis blood transfusions every 4 to 6 weeks. I haven't had not one since 2019. So life is different. I get to be free. I get to dream. I work full time. I'm finally able to travel. And my most rewarding side effect is that I get to be a full-time wife and mother. When my husband got deployed before I had gene therapy, I couldn't travel because I couldn't fly. And even when he got deployed to Iraq, I was in hospital bedbound. Now when he has his deployments, I can fly and be there for him just as much as he has been there for me. And my kids, they get to live normal lives without the fear of, if I leave home, maybe when I come back, my mom will be dead. They don't have to think like that anymore. They didn't even want to go to school because they feared I wouldn't be here when they got back. So now they run amok a little bit too much for mama, but it didn't just free me, it freed my family. So my life is completely different.
That's amazing to hear. I want to hear from Kendra. What is it like now to see your now? How old is she now? Like,
Man, she's 7, which
7
is
now.
wild.
Yes.
I think that every day, since she was diagnosed, but even after transplant, there's just this level of gratitude that I possess in my life that is unexplainable. And I look at her and she is just a regular kid, a regular 7-year-old who runs and jumps and is teasing her brother and sister, and she loves to swim, and that is like her jam. Swimming is her thing. She's in swimming lessons, and I just think about the endless possibilities that she now has because of this process. And I can't explain how much it means to me, how much it means to my family to see her grow and thrive. And there are days where I sometimes even almost forget that she had sickle cell disease. And I think even just that, it just releases so much of a weight. That weight is off of our shoulders. And it also, I think, going through this process and having our 3rd child, it allowed me to actually be the type of mom that I wanted to be, that I always thought that I kind of wanted to be. But I felt like a lot of dealing with with sickle cell disease kind of robbed me of that. I never allowed myself, and I feel guilty to this day that there are times where I feel like I never allowed myself to be truly vulnerable with Callie, because I felt like I needed to be so strong with her. I felt like I needed to have kept my head on a swivel all the time. You know, I could never let my guard down. And now with her, with Rain, and now our third child, like, so much of that stress and that guilt is alleviated. And I think that just like, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful to her care team, for our family, just for giving us the opportunity to have a better life for all of us.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. I want to hear, I want to hear from you, Jimi. What is life like now?
Life's good. You know, it's every day I'm still in awe, you know, as to what my life has become. It's been irreparably changed. One, just I think achieving my dream of being a father.
Mm-hmm.
I can't get over it. That's literally what my life revolves around. And to think that I have the energy to keep up with all three of them is fantastic. There were days I couldn't climb a flight of stairs without having to stop to catch my breath, you know, and now I'm running around the house with three kids nonstop all the time. I think for me, that's just the biggest positive that has come out of this. But at the same time, I feel, you know, with all the positivity of the new life I have, at the same time, I do wake up sometimes wishing that more people had just the opportunity I've had. You know, aside from being a father, I have now just the chance, you know, at going for something, you know, the chance at chasing something, you know, that just having the chance alone feels quite special. You know, before I never could dream about anything because there's no way I can try this, you know. Usually when you fall down, the goal is to get back up. But with sickle cell, when you fall down, you find out you just keep falling.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so to have the opportunity to fall down and get back up is just so special.
Watching you with your children gave me joy, Jimi. When we had dinner together, watching you be a father and just the look on your face as you engaged with your son, it just warmed my heart. So it's something beautiful to see. Wunmi, you wanted to wrap us up with the last question?
Yes. Looking back on your journey now, if you were to give one piece of advice to aspiring patients, caregivers, what would that be? And I'm going to start with Tesha, then Ashley, then Victoria, then Jimi, then Kendra.
If I had any piece of advice for warriors or caregivers who are even thinking about this treatment, I would definitely say do your research. There are so many opportunities out here that can assist, whereas for many years we did not have choices, but we have choices now. I know that I came from a place of desperation, but you know, looking back now, I know that may not have been the best methodology when choosing a treatment plan. But there are options. Advocate for yourself, and if your child is too young to do that, or your spouse or the person you're caring for is too weak to do that for them. We need someone to have that voice. Sometimes we talked about the isolation. And so because of that isolation and feeling unheard for so long, that you forget to stand up for yourself, to be your advocate. But definitely you want to have an advocate in your corner. I would also say just come to the table with hope. Just know that there is hope no matter where you are in your sickle cell journey. Know that there is hope. Hold on to that hope. Fight for yourself, and build a community around you that is there to support you no matter what decision or what path you decide to take.
Ashley?
I would just say stay the course. Gene therapy, it's not an easy process. living with sickle cell is not an easy process. You have to leave room for unexpected sees, delayed. But my motto was, even though there was sometimes we were delayed, we couldn't move forward, that it wasn't a denial, and that we were going to make it through. And we just took it 1 second, 1 minute, 1 day at a time. So just stay the course, because it's light at the end of the tunnel. And once you cross over to the other side, it's such a beautiful, it's so beautiful. And it's being able to live life without any limitations. So I would just say, just stay the course and never give up. Keep fighting. If there's bad news, just keep pushing.
Very well said, Victoria.
I would say don't give up. Like Tesha said, do your research and go with your gut. You don't have to have the world's opinion. When you pick the one that you feel is right for you, and you pray about it and you move forward. A lot of times we say we need community, but community don't mean 10, 15, 100 people. If you got at least one good friend that can be positive with you, move forward with that and know that God has you. So everything in life is hard. Everything that's worth having, you have to work for. So none of these procedures are easy, but trust me, living with sickle cell disease isn't easy. That's why we're called warriors. So if you can battle this disease and overcome it, you can face these treatments, and it's not as nearly as bad as living a life with sickle cell disease. So stay hopeful and stand up for yourself. When you make the decision, just move forward. Keep moving 1 day, 1 minute, 1 second at a time.
Jimi and Kendra, you guys have a tough job, because I think everybody has said really profound things, but please wrap us up.
Yeah, to add to that, it's just really just to think about so many options out there now, thankfully. So aside from, just getting to the next day, every single day, that should be your goal, is to get to tomorrow. And then when you get to tomorrow, get to the next day. Aside from just focusing on that, one thing that I've found really helpful for me, and to be quite honest, this is post-transplant, I wish I thought like this while I was in the throes of the disease, is really just focusing on what you can control. I think that should be your goal till you get to that curative journey, is going through life in two lenses: things that are in my control and things that are not in my control. And things that are not in your control, just let it all fall by the wayside. Don't let them get to you. The doctors that might shortchange you on pills when you truly need it, take what you have, and just focus on the things that you have control over, and it'll help you. It's going to be tough, obviously, but it'll help you get to that curative goal, or that journey. It'll help you get to it a lot less stressed.
Kendra?
Yeah. And then I think I feel like you said, everybody said all of the things. I think a couple of things is that every single warrior that I know, none of you have a spirit of fear. God never gave you that, and what he did give you is just the tremendous ability to get up the next day and start again. And I think that what I've seen is that the people in the sickle cell community are some of the strongest people that I know, and that I've seen. And everything that you have gone through, you can also get through this. And then I think the other thing too is that even along the journey, try to also focus in on the good days, because I think so much of it is like we get so caught up in the strife and the hard times and all that kind of stuff. But I can certainly remember, there's certainly times where I remember looking at Callie, even when she had her disease, or coming home and just holding her and just being so grateful that I have the opportunity to be her mother, that she had the opportunity to be healed, and she's home and she's healthy and she's safe. And so I think that even through all the hard times, like, try to remember just grab a few moments of remember that there's still joy here. There's still joy in whether or not you're cured or not. There's still joy in your everyday life. And there's also joy on the other side of cure as well.
I want to say thank you to each and every one of you, but more importantly, I also want to leave a little tidbit for warriors who are still navigating sickle cell disease, because being on the other side is not going to be possible for everyone. And so to the warriors that are on this live, there is a family that we have that is like no other. Everyone on the other side always defines themselves as a sickle cell warrior because there is beauty in that title. And so for those that are still soldiering on, we will continue to be here for you. And for those on the other side, we will continue to be here for you as well, because we're navigating uncharted territories. But I just wanted to leave those 2 cents, because I know, as encouraged as we are by cell and gene therapies, disease modifying therapies are going to be the way forward for other warriors who are unable to get to curative therapies. And so I just want to leave everyone with a little bit of hope as we get off this live. But thank you guys so much.
Well, thank you, Wunmi, for your words of wisdom once again. And thank you to our panelists and for sharing your story with such transparency, such bravery. I admire you and I wish you nothing but the best. I also want to thank Tiana Wolford from SC Red. Please feel better. We love you. Hang in there, sis. And to our sponsors, Vertex, CVS, Bluebird Bio, and Pfizer. Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation, navigating transformative therapies for sickle cell disease. And we'll see you next time. Take care, everyone.
Thanks.